As we've seen as we've heard in the last couple of weeks in the Gospels, Jesus spent a lot of his time soon before his arrest and crucifixion being challenged by people that didn't like him. It seemed wherever Jesus went, there were those who were antagonistic, looking for a fight, looking for an argument. We saw it last week when there was a question of, should we pay a tax to Caesar? And so in the gospel today, here we go again. Jesus is off in the temple, hoping at least there he might have some time to pray, some time not to be attacked, and yet it's exactly what happens. Like in last week's gospel, two religious factions, Sadducees and Pharisees, they don't like each other, as I said last week. And here they come together, though. They become joined together because they just don't like Jesus either, and they want to trap him. And so they ask him a question that they know if he answers it in either way, he's going to get in trouble, at least in their mind. So they ask him, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" Now keep in mind, there were 613 laws to be observed by faithful Jewish people. 613. Thank God the Baltimore Catechism didn't have that many, huh? And so it appears that this might be an innocent question, but it was a question that was debated for centuries among the Jewish people. Were the law, all 16, of equal value, or was one more important than the other? The Pharisees said they're all important, that each one should be observed faithfully, and not one was less than the other. The Sadducees said no. Some were more important, and that you couldn't make the people observe all 613 because it's impossible. And so when they bring this question to Jesus, it's going to be a tough way to answer. Because if he picks out one as more important than the other, they're going to say, they're all important. They're all important. How can you and how do you have the authority to tell us what's more important? And if he answers, one's more important than the other, you're going to have the opposite thing happen. But Jesus, as always, is ready for them. And so Jesus really fools them, because he not only says, the most important is to love God with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your soul, and gives them a second one, love your neighbor. And then I think he gives a third one, really, because he says, love your neighbor and yourself. And so Jesus is trying to make the point, that all of the other 614, or 13 if you take my theory of 3, that they're important too. Because if you live that 3 that I mentioned, you will live those others. And so Jesus is really saying, if you truly love God above all things, you will do nothing willing to offend him, and you will keep all the laws that are directed towards God. And if we truly love our neighbor, we will do nothing willingly to offend them. And so doing, we will keep all of the other commandments which are directed towards our neighbor. Now, the gospel doesn't tell us, but I think the Pharisees and Sadducees just shook their head and said, oh, God. Guy's pretty smart. He backed out of that pretty well. If there are any of you that are bored, not with the homily, please. But if any of you are bored and you have a lot of time on your hand, Google the search for the word love. I've been told, I haven't done this, I've been told you would find 54,700,000 sites. So if you got a little time today, you might check that out. But I'm also told that hate has only 6,400,000 hits. If you take that in Google there, isn't it sad that what makes up the majority of the headlines in the press and on television and radio is usually news about hate, not about love? We are bombarded with stories of political infighting, celebrity scandals, international acts of terrorism, murders, violent protests, and racial mistrust and unrest. I have often wondered, what if we had this people from other planets or creatures from other planets? And what if they had the opportunity to come down and spend a day learning about we humans here on Earth? And what if their only source of information about us was the media? I would think they'd have a pretty negative opinion of human beings. They would see and question, what is going on? Why is there so much division and hatred amongst them? Now, the real question, though, is, does all this negative news really define who we are as humans? I don't think so, and I really hope not. We cannot deny that there is evil in our world, but there is also so much good that surrounds us. The perspective as being a pastor, I see a lot of good. I see it every day in the people that I have the privilege to serve. I see it in the actions that are quiet and often unseen. I see it in so many different ways, that there is a lot of good that surrounds us. And I want to believe that the commandment of love of God and love of neighbor is what really defines us. That they will know we are Christians by our love. That is the challenge, I think, of our gospel living, is to be that community that can be identified by those words. See how they love one another. There's a remarkable quotation that was written by a Greek philosopher living in Athens in 125 BC. His name was Aristides, and he was not a Christian. He was an unbeliever. And he had observed the Christian community in Athens. And he wrote a letter to the Emperor Hadrian describing the Christians in the city of Athens, what he saw. And I think it's so wonderful, I want to quote it. And he goes and says this: Christians love one another. They never fail to help widows. They save orphans from those who would hurt them. If one of them has something, he gives freely to the one who has nothing, without boasting. If they see a stranger, Christians take him home and are happy as though they were a real brother or sister. And if they hear that one of them is in jail or persecuted for professing the name of their Redeemer, they all give him what he needs or she needs, and if possible, to redeem them and set them free. And if there is among them any poor or naked, if they have no spare food, they fast for 2 or 3 days in order to supply the needy. And then he ends with this beautiful sentence: truly, this is a new people, and there is something divine in them. Closing thought would be this: what if WNDU out of South Bend sent a correspondent here to our parish at Our Lady of the Lake to do a story about our faith community? Would the headline be, "They love God above all and their neighbor as their self"? I believe they would see a lot of that. And if not, If the headline was different, then I guess that would tell us we got a lot of work to do. And so let us continue to make sure that we, as a community here, will always be defined and looked at as they do truly love God and love their neighbor.